want to start with a question for Christopher, which is if you can talk a little bit about the sort of unusual gestation of this project and the different forms that it took from a film to a play to a film again.
Well, it was first written in the mid to late 90s as a screenplay called Sabina for 20th Century Fox and Julia Roberts' company. And, you know, founded in the way that screenplays often do. And it seemed too good, the material, to sort of not take further. So I turned it into a stage play called The Talking Cure, which we did in London at the National Theatre with Ray Fiennes. And then, I guess about a year or so later, I had a call from Mr. Cronenberg, which is who said, "Did I think it might make a film?" So it couldn't. It had a sort of circuitous progress, but I'm a happy ending, I think.
And did your take on the material change during that time? And then again, and maybe David could talk about when he came into it, if there was a sort of further gestation of the project.
I think to start with, the film was called Sabina because it was mostly centered on Sabina Spielrein. But in between the original screenplay and the stage play, it dawned on me that the central character was not Sabina, it couldn't really be Sabina. The central character had to be Jung. So there was quite a shift in emphases. And then I guess David will talk about it, but the work that I did with him mostly had to do with refining it, I think, and sharpening it and honing it.
Yes.
Well, actually, maybe David, you can answer this question because I was this morning. I thought did you ever fear that it might be redundant at this point in your career to make a movie about Freud and Jung, having made so many films about sexual perversion, split personalities, horror of the body, and so forth? And how did you find your way into it?
That doesn't sound like me to me. I think that I've made a lot of comedies, actually. But no, I don't really think about my other movies at all, frankly. I don't think about what I've done at all. When I decide to do something, become passionate about it, I'm only interested in realizing that particular thing. So I don't think about whether this fits in with anything or doesn't, or I've done it or not. I mean, once I get excited about it, I think when I read Christopher's play, and I've never seen it performed, but I felt, in retrospect, I think that I had always wanted to do something about Freud and the birth of psychoanalysis. But to say that isn't to say anything really, because it's such a vast topic and full of the panoply of incredible characters that surrounded the birth of psychoanalysis, all of them very eccentric and wonderful. And what I saw in Christopher's play was this fantastic structure that really beautifully distilled the essence of the era and of the psychoanalytic movement into primarily 5 characters. And I thought that got me very excited, because suddenly that was, the structure that could allow me to play with all of those topics. I have to point out that the first movie I ever made, Transfer, 7 minutes long, was about a psychiatrist and a patient. That was my first movie. So this really does feel like
Michael, can you tell us a little bit about how you became involved with the project, and a little bit about David as a director of actors, because I think the performances in the film are so completely stunning.
Yeah, we first met in Toronto. I flew up to have a lunch with David, and that's really when he started sort of directing me, if you like. I always think, great directors are great manipulators, and And, you know, he was already, you know, planting seeds in my mind then at that lunch about, you know, the story and what he found interesting about these various characters, and where he thought sort of Jung was coming from and his background. And we just had a really nice lunch, and then we talked a lot about motor racing, which we both share a passion. And then really, by the time we got on set, I think the one great thing, well, one of the many great things about David is he allows you to sort of breathe within it in your own way. You know, it's like, again, with, you know, great directors, I find, don't necessarily give you a huge amount of direction on the day. It's maybe a dinner that you had 2 nights before or a week before, just little sort of hints and little nudges and sort of sway you in certain directions, but without giving you anything sort of solidly, now you do this. I think any sort of great director that sort of work with that for them is the sort of is the last thing that they want. It's really a very sort of collaborative process, and one that's just very sort of free, and he creates a very safe place to create and take risks and try things out. And I have to say, it was a very humorous set, but everybody had done their homework, you know, and came ready to go to work. And I think that's what you know, the sort of already the respect that David has sort of commands that of his actors.
And Jeremy, you've had a long working relationship with David by this point. Did this film present any unique challenges from a production standpoint vis-a-vis other projects that you've done together?
Yeah, I suppose compared to many projects, this was a fairly simple project because we shot it in Germany, in Cologne, in a studio there, and with a very sort of nice atmosphere, and as Michael said, a very safe place to work. I mean, the principal problem today for me is getting the resources to make a film as beautiful as this, because you can see the work, an enormous amount of work and research and care went into the way the film was made, into the details of the film and the research of the film. And it was easy for me to do the film because David and I worked a couple of times before since 1980. I guess there was a moment called me and told me that we just didn't have. And I said, no, I wasn't really able to do it. And then we had went on a journey which a couple of hiccups, a couple of false starts, but it was really the most enjoyable, one of the most enjoyable films I've ever been involved with. And we filmed the balance of the film in Lake Constance, which is a very large lake in southern Germany, and that also was a sort of idyllic place to work, which really helped the film and helped concentrate everybody's work.
Questions from the press? Yes, on the end.
One of the most stunning images is the boat with great sails. Is that from the letters? Did Young have a boat? How did the boat come?
Yeah, it was a present from his wife, exactly as in the film.
Yeah, I have to, this opens the question of accuracy, and I have to say I think this movie is incredibly accurate in terms of the dialogue and all the sort of historical details, because that was an era, as you could see from the movie, of great letter writing, and these were very obsessive people, and so they recorded all their conversations and all their moments and all their dreams and analyzed them to death and so on. So we have huge documents, a ton of documents to back up really everything in the movie. So it's really quite accurate actually, in all the details.
In the front, yes.
Can you talk about David and Michael, about the choice of accents and how did you decide how to define them? What was the point of using them in the way that you did? And also, just a little side note, you didn't identify any of the other, I know you were saying that you didn't want to take the focus away, but you didn't identify any of the other disciples at the time. Was there that to keep the focus, or were there any other?
There's two questions. One about the, just for people who couldn't hear, the one about the use of accents in the film. How did they determine the use of accents? And also a question about why none of the other disciples are shown in the film other than Sabina.
I sort of asked Michael if he could do any accents other than his own strange accent, this Irish thing. And he said, well, I could probably do a bit of an English one. So I said, okay, let's go with that. No, I'm sort of lying. Basically,
Yes.
basically, it was really a very interesting kind of research to do, because the question would be, okay, did Freud have even a trace of a Yiddish accent when he spoke German? Did he speak Yiddish? Did he have a Viennese accent? He wasn't born in Vienna. He wasn't a native Viennese. Would he have had a Viennese accent? Would he have spoken High German instead? And also, of course, Jung. Would he was a Swiss German. Did he have a Swiss German accent? Or would he too have reverted to High German? And there are some recordings of Jung speaking English. You can see them on YouTube. He did a lot of interviews. He died in 1961. For Freud, there's really only one recording of his voice, and he's speaking English except for the end of it. And I did ask our German producer to tell me whether he sensed any kind of Viennese accent in what Freud was saying. The answer was no. He didn't. There was no Viennese accent there. So I felt that they definitely would speak High German to each other, because seriousness was an important business for these guys. They wanted really to be taken seriously as physicians, as medical men, as scientists, and so they would have dispensed with any regionality in what they were, even in their writing and their speaking. And they're both considered to be absolutely beautiful writers of German. Their literary qualities as writers are really highly valued, and once again, that would be, High German. It would be very formal, beautiful German. So that would lead us to say, okay, now, well, how does that translate into English? And at that point, we're saying it would be what we call received English, which is a kind of a standard English accent, not too posh, but not East End London either. And then for Kira, we had, because she was a Russian, and I was sure, though there's no recordings of her, that she would have spoken German with a Russian accent, so I asked her to do a bit of a Russian accent. And that's how we gradually got to where we were with the accent.
Yeah, it started when we sort of discussed mid-Atlantic, didn't we, first? And then we realized that we don't know what that means.
Because you sink in the middle of the ocean and it's cold.
And then sort of, it's actually that first time that we had lunch, we first discussed it, and it's like then, I think the great thing about sort of that sort of received pronunciation is that, when you're doing a period piece, I think it helps you sort of disappear into another era. And also, anybody in the academic world back then would not have passed or be taken seriously if they didn't speak Hochdeutsch, High German. And then we sort of took little differences then between Vigo's accent and my own. We wanted to show some sort of a colloquialism with Jung. So I didn't go very high English, and Vigo chose to go more clipped with his English to show the sort of difference there. And then, as David was saying, to sort of highlight the fact that Sabina was Russian, to have her do sort of Russian accent.
Well, you see Ferenczi on the boat, and he did travel to America with Freud.